Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a case that sends shockwaves, not just through Connecticut, but the entire world. Imagine this. A flight attendant vanishes. Gone. No body. No witnesses. Just a husband with a story that keeps changing. It's the Helle Crafts case. And the only roadmap we have through this maze of mystery is a Wikipedia article on her murder.
This case, it's really something else, because it actually changed legal history in Connecticut. It was the very first time a murder conviction was secured without a body ever being found. It really gets you thinking about, how far can justice reach and what can forensic science do to fill those gaps?
That's exactly what got me hooked. So how do
Yeah.
you solve a murder without a body? Like, where do you even start?
Well, in this case, it all begins with Helly's marriage to Richard Crafts. He was an Eastern Airlines pilot. And, on the surface, they look like they had it all. Beautiful house in Newtown, Connecticut, 3 kids, the whole American dream. But as anyone who's familiar with this case knows, under that, perfect surface cracks were starting to show.
Yeah, like those strange late-night phone calls Helly was picking up on. She told her friends about her suspicions about Richard maybe being unfaithful. And being a woman of action, she didn't just sit around wondering. She actually talked to a divorce lawyer and went as far as hiring a private investigator, Keith Mayo.
Hiring Mayo, now that was a game changer. He managed to get photos of Richard kissing another flight attendant. Now, even without a body, that's pretty damning evidence for a divorce case. Of course, nobody knew then just how important those pictures would become.
It's crazy to think that those were like the first steps Helly was taking, almost like she could sense the danger lurking underneath. And then on November 18th, 1986, Hella's dropped off at home by some friends after a long flight from Frankfurt. And that was the last time anyone saw her alive.
What makes this disappearance so eerie is that a snowstorm hit that very same night. Like, try to picture it. Swirling snow, everything's isolated. It's like the perfect cover for a crime. It feels like something straight out of a mystery novel, but with very real and tragic consequences.
It gets even more unsettling when you think about Richard's constantly changing stories. First, he claims Helly's visiting her mom in Denmark. Then, he changes his tune. Now he's saying she's gone on a trip with a friend to the Canary Islands. This whole web of lies just makes the mystery even deeper.
These inconsistencies, and you know what Heller herself said? She had this feeling. She actually told her friends, if anything happens to me, don't just assume it was an accident. It's like she knew. Her words were like a chilling prophecy, this foreboding whisper of what was coming.
It's really remarkable that Helly's friends, they actually listened to those warnings. They trusted their instincts and reached out to that private investigator, Keith Mayo. And so on December 1st, over 2 weeks after Helly vanished, Mayo reports her missing to the Newtown police.
And this is where things get a little bit complicated. The police, they were hesitant to look into Richard. Some people believe it was because he was a volunteer police officer in Newtown and in Southbury. Can you imagine that conflict of interest?
It's almost impossible to believe, right? The very people who are supposed to protect are seemingly reluctant to even act. But thankfully, Mayo didn't give up. He took his findings straight to the county prosecutor, and that finally got things moving. The Connecticut State Police took over, and that was a crucial turning point.
Just think about it. More than 2 weeks had already passed by this point. So much valuable time lost and potential evidence gone.
Yeah.
But finally, on December 26th, while Richard was conveniently on a Christmas vacation in Florida with the kids, the state police searched the Crafts house.
And that's when things took a dark turn. What they found inside was straight out of a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Pieces of carpet were gone from the main bedroom. There were bloodstains on the mattress. And the nanny, she remembers this grapefruit-sized stain on that missing carpet. It was like something out of a horror movie.
And it gets worse. Richard's credit card statements showed some very suspicious purchases. A freezer, but weirdly it wasn't at the house. New sheets, a comforter, and most chilling, the rental of a woodchipper. Like a shopping list for a crime no one wanted to imagine.
And there's one purchase you didn't mention. One that seemed normal at first, but it turned out to be really incriminating. A chainsaw. The chainsaw was found later in Lake Zoar, and when they tested it, they found hair and blood that matched Helly's DNA. It was a direct connection, a real piece of the puzzle, and it painted a scary picture of what might have happened.
And that's where things shift from a missing person case to something much darker. It feels like investigators were trying to put together a puzzle, but in the dark. They had these pieces of information, the blood, the missing carpet, that woodchipper rental. But the most important piece, Helle herself, was gone.
Yeah, you're spot on about that challenge. It's one thing to suspect something bad happened, but without a body, proving what happened, let alone who did it, it's incredibly difficult. But the investigators got a break, and it came from a totally unexpected place.
You're talking about the snowplow driver, right? The one who saw something strange by that lake.
That's right. Joseph Hine, he was clearing snow during that blizzard, and he saw this rental truck, and it had a wood chipper parked near Lake Zoar. The image just stuck with him. Something felt wrong about it, and when he heard about Helle disappearing, he called the police.
Wow. Talk about right place, right time, right, and remembering that weeks later. It's hard to believe.
It shows just how observant Hine was. It also highlights how crucial those little details can be in a case like this. His tip led investigators straight to that spot on Lake Zoar, and what they found there was truly horrifying.
I can only imagine. This is where things get pretty graphic for anyone listening. What did they actually discover at the lake?
Okay, so picture this. A frozen lake, snow everywhere. It's the aftermath of that blizzard. And then scattered among the ice and snow, these tiny bits of bone, hair, and tissue. A tooth crown, a fingernail with pink nail polish, even pieces of metal. It was like someone tried to wipe away every trace of a person. But the ice, it held on to those tiny, terrifying pieces.
It's almost too awful to think about. But even though it was so gruesome, those little fragments helped identify Helle, didn't they? Even without a full body, forensic science could give those crucial answers.
Absolutely. This case really shows the power of forensic dentistry. The tooth crown they found at the lake matched perfectly with Helle's dental records. That one piece of evidence, along with everything else they found, allowed the Connecticut State Medical Examiner's Office to issue a death certificate for Helle on January 13, 1987. And that led to Richard's arrest.
It's kind of amazing, in a dark way, how something so small, a tooth, a fingernail, can be so important in a murder case. It really tells you a lot about how advanced forensic science was, even back then.
This case broke new ground in many ways. Take the experiment that the state medical examiner, H. Wayne Carver, did. He wanted to see if it was actually possible to use a wood chipper to get rid of a body. So he ran a pretty grisly test.
Okay, I have to ask, what did he do? I'm both curious and a little scared to know.
Well, Carver got a pig, about the size and weight of a person, and put it through a wood chipper. And, well, let's just say the results were eye-opening. The bone fragments the wood chipper made were strikingly similar to what they found at Lake Zoar. This experiment gave the prosecution crucial evidence showing that their theory was actually possible.
It's incredible, in a disturbing kind of way, how far investigators will go to find the truth. It makes you wonder, without that experiment, would they have been able to get a conviction?
It's tough to say for sure, but that experiment definitely made their case stronger. The Helle Crafts case really pushed the limits of forensic investigation and became a blueprint for no-body murder trials in the future.
And speaking of the trial, there was a bit of a problem, wasn't there? I read that the first trial ended up being a mistrial. What happened?
Yeah, you're right. The first trial, which was in New London in May 1988, had a really surprising turn of events. Despite the huge amount of evidence against Richard, one juror just refused to talk with the others. It ended up with a hung jury and a mistrial.
Wow, what a setback. Just one person with their own doubts or biases could stand in the way of justice. What do you think was going on in their head? What evidence didn't convince them?
It shows how complex the jury system is and how individual beliefs, even when there's a mountain of evidence, can derail the whole process.
But they didn't give up, right? They went back, rethought their approach, and put Richard on trial again?
You got it. The second trial was in Norwalk, and this time justice was served. On November 21st, 1989, the jury found him guilty. Richard Crafts got 50 years in prison for murdering Helle Crafts.
50 years. It seems like a long time, but is it really enough for such a horrible crime? Especially since he got out in 2020 because of good behavior. It really makes you think, what is true justice in a case like this?
That's a really complicated question. You have the seriousness of the crime, the brutality, the planning that went into it, but you also have the laws about sentencing and the idea that people can change. The Helle Crafts case brings up these tough questions that we're still struggling with as a society.
And it's not just the legal stuff. This case had a huge impact on popular culture, right? I read somewhere that Fargo, that Coen Brothers movie, might have been inspired by the Helle Crafts case.
Absolutely. The similarities are striking. A seemingly normal Midwestern town, a husband who goes to extremes to hide his crime. They even use a wood chipper. It shows how powerful this story is, how it caught people's imaginations, and how it's still relevant even today.
And let's not forget about true crime as a genre. The Helle Crafts case was the very first episode of Forensic Files, a show that captivated millions with its deep dives into real investigations. It's clear that this case resonated with the public and became a landmark in our fascination with true crime.
And not just the sensationalism of the case that draws us in. I think there's a deeper fascination with the science, with the cleverness of those investigators who pieced it all together without a body. It's a testament to human curiosity, to our need to understand the dark side of humanity, and to our relentless pursuit of justice, even when it seems impossible.
It's like we're drawn to these stories to face our fears, to see the extremes of human behavior, and to reassure ourselves that even in the darkest of times, the truth can be found.
And that brings us to a key point in our deep dive today. We've looked at the past, the investigation, the trial. But what about the future? What can we take away from the Helle Crafts case to prevent tragedies like this from happening again? What advances in technology might have changed this investigation if it were to occur today?
That question really gets to the core of things, doesn't it? We've talked about DNA analysis, but imagine the impact of modern tools like digital forensics, facial recognition, even artificial intelligence. Would they have sped things up? Could they have given even more undeniable evidence?
It's fascinating to think about. Think of the digital footprints we all leave now. Phone records, emails, texts, internet searches. All of that could have been incredibly helpful for investigators. We also have much better techniques for analyzing bloodstains now, which could have shown us even more about what happened in the Crafts house.
And don't forget the psychology involved. Profiling has come a long way since 1986. Could a deeper understanding of Richard's personality and his motives have helped investigators see what he might do or even intervene before anything happened?
That's a really thought-provoking question. Would a better grasp of the warning signs of domestic violence have helped Helle's friends take stronger action? Could intervention programs have helped her get out of a dangerous situation? These questions go way beyond this case and touch on the bigger societal issues surrounding domestic violence.
It reminds us that while technology is vital for solving crimes, it's equally important to focus on preventing them, on educating people, and on creating a culture where victims feel safe to speak out and ask for help.
Definitely. The Helle Crafts case isn't just a story of a horrific crime, it's a call to action. It's a call for more awareness, for better support systems, and for society to change its priorities to focus on prevention and intervention instead of just reacting to tragedy.
There's a lot to unpack here, and I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing about this case that I find especially fascinating.
Yeah.
It has to do with the wood chipper itself. It's weird to think about something like a wood chipper, an everyday thing, becoming so important in a murder case. It went from being a tool for yard work to this symbol of horror, a symbol of how far someone would go to hide their crime.
It's that unexpected contrast that makes this case so disturbing. The wood chipper, it kind of represents the cold, calculated nature of the crime. It takes away Helle's humanity, reducing her to just pieces scattered in the snow.
And yet it was those pieces, analyzed by experts, that ultimately led to Richard being found guilty. It's like this horrible irony. The very tool that was supposed to make Helle disappear actually ended up preserving her memory, her story, and ultimately brought her justice.
You've hit on something really important there. Even though Helle's body was never found whole, her presence was felt throughout the entire investigation and trial. Those fragments, they became her voice. They became her testament to the violence she suffered.
It makes you think about just how powerful forensic science is. How those tiny bits of evidence, things we can't even see with our own eyes, can tell us so much about what really happened.
The Helle Crafts case was a turning point in forensic science. It showed that you could build a strong case even without a body. You could use careful analysis of trace evidence, bloodstains, tool marks, even the killer's behavior.
It's almost like a detective story where science is the hero, putting the clues together, revealing the secrets that were hidden. And in this case, science won. A killer was brought to justice, and Helle's loved ones got some sense of closure.
And it's not just about closure, it's about accountability. The Helle Crafts case set a precedent. It showed that even if you try really hard to cover up a crime, the advancements in forensic science can expose you.
It's a powerful reminder that no one is above the law, no matter how smart they think they are. And as technology keeps getting better, I can only imagine the tools and techniques that are coming to help us solve the mysteries of the future.
Imagine the possibilities. Think about advances in DNA analysis, artificial intelligence that can look at crime scenes and predict patterns, maybe even virtual reality that can put jurors right there at the scene of the crime. The potential for innovation in forensic science is truly incredible.
It's both exciting and kind of scary to think about how these advancements could change the way we investigate crimes, but also, We have to think about the ethical implications.
You're absolutely right to bring up ethics.
Good.
As technology becomes more powerful, we have to make sure it's used responsibly. We have to protect people's privacy and make sure these tools aren't misused.
It's this constant balancing act, pushing the limits of science while still upholding justice and fairness. And in the end, it comes down to us, the investigators, the scientists, the lawyers, all of us. We're the ones who have to make sure that justice is served.
That's a good point. It's a reminder that technology is only as good as the people using it. We need people with integrity who really understand the science, but who are also committed to doing the right thing and finding the truth.
That's a great thought to end on. The Helle Crafts case is a stark reminder that even in the darkest times, there are people who dedicate their lives to bringing the truth to light, to fighting for what's right, and to making sure that even the most terrible crimes don't go unpunished.
It shows the resilience of humanity, our drive for justice, and the power of science to shine a light on the darkest parts of our world.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this. The Helle Crafts case, it's a story that will stay with you. It makes you think about human nature, how far science has come, and the constant search for justice. But it's also a story of hope, a reminder that even when something awful happens, the truth can be found, and those responsible can be held accountable. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We're looking forward to exploring more fascinating cases with you in the future.